There are places that should not exist. Patches of life where nothing should grow. Homes that still breathe long after the people inside are gone. Tonight's story isn't about ghosts or monsters hiding in the dark. It's about something older, something that waits behind walls, feeding on the ones who think they can't be seen. The man you're about to hear from thought he was invisible. He called himself a Frogger, someone who slips unnoticed into other people's homes, living in the quiet spaces no one ever looks. But what he found inside one forgotten ranch in the Utah desert wasn't shelter. It was hunger. This is the Frogger's confession. Listen closely, because once you step over the line, there's no going back. I've been a Frogger since I was 13. Some people think that means I'm homeless or a drifter, but that's not what this is. Being a Frogger means you live inside someone else's life without them ever knowing. You slip between the cracks of their existence. You sleep under their roofs, breathe their air, touch their world, but you don't exist in it. It started as survival. Now it's something else. I do it for the pulse that crawls up the back of my neck when I hear a lock turn, knowing I'm 3 feet away and invisible. I do it because being unseen is the only proof I've ever had that I was really there. You can't understand it unless you've done it. You think you'd be terrified, but after a while, the fear turns into something sacred, a discipline. You learn how to move like silence itself, how to time your steps with the rhythm of someone else's life, their shower running, their phone ringing, the hum of a refrigerator masking the creak of a floorboard. There's an online world for people like me. We call ourselves Froggers. The name comes from the old arcade game, jumping from place to place, avoiding getting caught. We share maps, photos, plans. The surface web doesn't know about us. You have to be invited. And once you're in, you don't leave. I'm one of the old ones now. They call me Echo. I've lived under floors, inside attics, behind false walls. I once stayed in a luxury penthouse for almost 6 months, while the owners hosted dinner parties twice a week. They never knew. I left notes in their grocery lists and rearranged the magnets on their fridge, just enough for them to doubt themselves. It wasn't cruelty. It was art. But I wasn't always this way. My first hiding place wasn't a mansion or a rich couple's condo. It was a maintenance closet behind a laundromat on the south end of town. I'd been running from a foster home that smelled like mold and anger. My mother left me at a fire station when I was still swaddled in a duffel bag. That's what the report said. No name, no note. Just a baby wrapped in an old army coat. I grew up in orphanages and temporary houses. People who took me in didn't want a kid, they wanted a check. I learned to be quiet, to move light, to listen for footsteps. The first time I hid in someone's house without permission, I was 9. They found me 2 days later, curled behind a washing machine, eating dry cereal out of the box. I remember how calm I felt when the cops dragged me out. I remember thinking, they only see me because I let them. That thought never left me. When I turned 13, I stopped running to places and started running through them. Empty homes, construction sites, seasonal cabins, then occupied ones. I learned the difference between a house and a habitat. A house echoes, a habitat breathes. You can feel it when you step inside the pulse of a life, the static charge of things being used, touched, loved. Most people think Froggers steal. They don't understand. We don't take. We watch. We witness. There's a purity in it, being a ghost in someone's story. You're there for everything: the arguments, the laughter, the whispered phone calls, the midnight sobs. You hear the unfiltered humanity that people only reveal when they think they're alone. You begin to feel like God's shadow, unseen but omnipresent. I'd been doing it for nearly 15 years when I found the ranch. By then, I'd perfected everything: my tools, my timing, my patience. I was coming off a clean exit from a job in Boulder. A newlywed couple, a house full of wedding gifts and expensive wine. 2 months without a single mistake. I slipped out after their honeymoon like I'd never been there. That night, I was high on it, that quiet rush that comes from being everywhere and nowhere. I was scrolling through satellite images, looking for new targets. I don't know what I was hoping to find. Maybe just something that didn't look like everything else. And then I saw it. A perfect green square in the middle of the Utah desert. It shouldn't have been there, not in that expanse of dry, cracked earth. It was surrounded by nothing. No roads, no irrigation systems, no power lines. Just one lush patch of color, glowing like a bruise on the world. I zoomed in. The resolution blurred, but I could make out trees, maybe an orchard, and a ranch house with a wide porch. It looked alive. I tried searching the coordinates. No record. The county database had nothing. It wasn't registered as farmland, not even a homestead. I cross-referenced it with Google Maps Bing and an old weather satellite archive. Each one showed the same anomaly, a square of green where there should have been nothing but dust. That's when I posted it on the forum. Anyone tried this place? The replies came fast. What is that A movie set? No thanks. Those rural folks shoot first. He won't do it. Even Echo's not that stupid. That one stayed with me. Maybe it was ego. Maybe it was the emptiness that always follows the high. But I knew the moment I read those words that I was going. It wasn't about winning anymore. It was about proving that the rules didn't apply to me. I packed light a canvas rucksack, 2 knives, a flashlight, and a roll of duct tape. I didn't tell anyone. Froggers don't say goodbye. We vanish. I left before dawn. If I'd known what that place really was, if I'd known what waited beneath that green square in the desert, I would have let them call me a coward. The desert changes you. It strips you down until there's nothing left but the sound of your own heartbeat. Every step crunches like dry bones. Every breath scrapes dust into your lungs. I thought I knew isolation. I'd spent years hiding in other people's walls, but this was different. The silence here didn't hide you. It swallowed you whole. I traveled light. My pack held water a little jerky, a folding knife, and a battered flashlight. I moved mostly at dusk, slept when the air grew cold enough to bite. I stuck to low ground and dry creek beds, following the invisible line east toward the coordinates burned into my brain. On the second day, I started to doubt what I'd seen. From the ground, the land looked endless. No sign of life, not even scrub. The sun made a furnace of the sky, and my skin peeled where my sleeves had frayed. But sometime around mid-afternoon, I noticed something strange. The horizon shimmered, not from heat, but from color. At first, it was only a haze, a faint green bleeding into the brown. Then, as I crested a ridge, I saw it clearly, the same square of impossible life I'd seen on the satellite feed. Lush grass, rows of fruit trees, even a cornfield waving in a wind I couldn't feel. It looked like someone had carved a piece of spring out of the earth and dropped it in the middle of death. I stood there for a long time, trying to make sense of it. The line between the desert and the green was sharp, unnaturally sharp. One step of dust, and then grass. When I reached it, I crouched down and ran my hand over the soil. The dirt outside the border was dry and brittle, but inside it was cool and damp, almost pulsing with moisture. I brushed some of the grass aside and saw something white buried just beneath the surface, a thin line running perfectly straight. At first, I thought it was chalk, maybe limestone. But when I rubbed it between my fingers, it left no dust. It felt like salt, fine and smooth, compacted into the earth, like it had been pressed there deliberately. The line stretched as far as I could see in either direction. It wasn't a fence, not a pipe, not any kind of barrier I knew. And yet, as I stared across it, I felt it a pressure, faint but definite humming, low through the ground. I stepped over. The air changed instantly, cooler, cleaner. The smell of vegetation hit me like memory-wet soil leaves the sweetness of fruit. The temperature dropped 10 degrees at least. The desert behind me shimmered as though I'd passed through glass. I remember thinking, this isn't possible. But impossibility stopped mattering somewhere around mile 20. I followed the edge of a small orchard until I reached a stone wall, half collapsed under ivy. From there, I could see the house. It was larger than I'd imagined, built in an L shape with a wraparound porch and tall windows. White wood siding a windmill turning lazily behind the barn. It could have been any ranch house from the 1950s except for how alive it looked. Everything about it was perfect. No rot, no decay. Even the paint gleamed. And then I saw them. A family stood on the porch. The father was tall, broad-shouldered, wiping his hands on a rag. The mother carried a tray of lemonade glasses. 3 children played in the grass with a small brown dog. Their laughter drifted faintly on the wind, real and soft and distant, like a recording of happiness. I crouched lower behind the wall, watching. They looked normal, too normal. The kind of normal that feels rehearsed. Their clothes were plain old-fashioned, but clean. The father's hair was short and combed back, the mother's tied neatly in a bun. The children ran circles around them, bright and barefoot. For a moment, I forgot why I was there. Watching them, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, envy. They looked untouched by the world, preserved in the kind of peace that doesn't exist anymore. They ate dinner outside that evening, near a small fire pit by the barn. The smell of grilled meat floated across the field. I sat there hidden long after the stars came out, waiting for the house to go dark. One by one, the lights winked out. Porch, kitchen, upstairs windows. That's when I moved. I kept low, following the line of the wall, until I reached the east side of the house. Every step was measured, every shadow chosen. I paused when I heard the faint rustle of the dog moving through the grass, but it didn't bark. It just circled once near the porch and disappeared under it. The wood siding was cool under my hands. I tested each window. Most were latched. One wasn't a kitchen window, left slightly ajar. I slid it open just enough to slip through. Inside, the air was different, heavy with warmth and the faint smell of oil and earth. My feet touched wood, polished to a dull shine. The house was old but cared for. Everything had its place. I moved slowly through the kitchen. There were no cameras, no alarms. The refrigerator hummed softly. I opened it just enough to see inside Jar's vegetables, a loaf of bread wrapped in cloth. I broke off a piece of cheese, took a sip of milk, and closed everything exactly as it was. The living room opened into the kitchen, Bookshelves lined the walls, packed with Bible's hymnals and older stranger volumes bound in cracked leather. The artwork caught my eye, not prints, but hand-painted scenes. Angels and demons locked in battle crosses carved into dark wood, a figure kneeling before something horned and radiant. It wasn't standard Christianity. It was older, heavier. Near the staircase, a framed piece hung crooked. It showed a man with a goat's head holding a newborn. The details were so fine that the goat's eyes seemed to shimmer when my flashlight caught them. I don't know how long I stood there. When I finally found my hiding place, it was behind a false panel in a storage closet near the laundry room. Someone had remodeled that section. Recently, the panel didn't sit flush with the wall. I pried it loose, just enough to slip inside. It wasn't comfortable, but I'd slept in worse. That night, I listened. The house creaked like all houses do, but underneath, I heard things that didn't belong. A faint rhythm, almost a chant, rising and falling below the floor. Then silence. I pressed my ear to the wall, but the sound was gone. Sleep came in flashes, shallow, uncertain. And when I finally closed my eyes for good, I dreamt of salt lines glowing under my skin and voices whispering from the dirt, telling me I'd already crossed something I was never meant to find. Morning came slow. Light filtered through the cracks in the wall, thin and pale, turning the dust in my hiding space into drifting gold. For a moment, I forgot where I was. Then I heard footsteps above me, a chair scraping against wood, and the faint clatter of dishes. The family was awake. I pressed my ear against the thin panel of wood, listening to their day unfold. The mother's voice was soft, warm, the kind that could turn anything into comfort. The father spoke rarely, his words short, steady, commanding. The children were loud laughter, mixed with questions and the thuds of small feet running down hallways. It sounded almost peaceful. They moved like clockwork. Breakfast was always before 7. The father and the eldest boy left soon after. I could hear the front door close, their boots crunching over gravel. The mother sang while she cleaned. The tune was unfamiliar. Not quite a hymn, not quite a lullaby. It lingered in my head long after her voice faded. I stayed hidden, counting hours by the shadows that moved across the slats. When the house fell silent around noon, I slipped out. The air in the kitchen felt different in daylight, warmer but heavier. I moved quickly, scanning every corner, learning the rhythm of the house. The refrigerator hummed like before, but now I noticed the details I'd missed in the dark. A wooden cross carved into the fridge door handle. Another burned into the edge of the cutting board. Tiny ones etched into the window frames, into the walls themselves, hundreds of them, like a language of protection carved in wood. Even the silverware handles bore faint scratches in the shape of crucifixes. It wasn't decoration, it was devotion. The living room smelled faintly of candle wax and lavender. A Bible sat open on the table pages, worn thin from use. But tucked beneath it was something else, an old leather-bound book with no title on its spine. I lifted it carefully. The cover was cracked, the pages brittle. Inside were prayers written by hand, not printed. The ink had faded to brown. Some of the words weren't English Latin, maybe. Others I didn't recognize at all. I closed it quickly. Something about it felt wrong, like it had been waiting to be read again. I made my way upstairs. The hallway creaked beneath my feet, but the sound of a radio in the kitchen covered it. 3 bedrooms, 2 small ones filled with toys and handmade quilts, and 1 large master room with a high ceiling and open windows. Everything was clean, neat, ordinary, except for one door. It was nailed shut, not locked, nailed. Thick iron nails hammered into the frame, their heads blackened with soot. A faded tapestry hung over it, stitched with a strange pattern, a circle of twisting vines with a single eye in the center. I leaned closer. The smell that came through the cracks was faint, but unmistakable old soil and iron, like the air after lightning hits earth. A shiver crawled up my neck. I didn't touch it again. By mid-afternoon, the family returned. I barely made it back to the crawl space before I heard the truck pull in. The engine cut, followed by laughter and the sound of the dog barking. I held my breath as they entered Boots, knocking dust from the porch. For a long time, I stayed still, listening. The mother cooked, the children played. The father prayed out loud before they ate. I could hear every word. Bless this home, Lord, and keep the land alive. May the soil be pure, the air clean, and the fruit ripe. Deliver us from drought, from pestilence, from the mouths of the wicked. There was something off in that last part. Not the words themselves, but the tone. It didn't sound like he was asking. It sounded like a warning. That night, after the house went quiet, I slipped out again. I moved slower this time, every nerve alive. I wanted to see the nail door again to make sure I hadn't imagined it. As I reached the top of the stairs, I froze. The tapestry was gone. The door stood open wide enough for a man to pass through. The hallway light was dim, but I could see just far enough to make out the room beyond walls, lined with jars, each one filled with cloudy liquid. Something pale floated inside them. I couldn't look long. My stomach turned cold. The floor creaked behind me. I spun around, flashlight low, but the hall was empty. No footsteps, no movement, nothing. The air felt heavier, though charged, like someone had exhaled behind me. I backed away slowly. When I looked back at the room, the door was closed again. The tapestry hung in its place, still and undisturbed. I crawled back to my hiding space and sat there in the dark for what felt like hours, waiting for the sound of breathing that wasn't mine. It didn't come. Sometime before dawn, I heard the mother's voice again, soft whispering through the cracks. The Lord provides. It wasn't a prayer this time. It was a promise, and for the first time since I'd started this life, I wanted to leave a house before I'd even finished exploring it. But something deeper kept me there, curiosity, or maybe pride. Because whatever was happening inside those walls, I could feel it pulsing through the floor, like the whole house was breathing. The third morning in that house was colder. The air didn't just hang heavy anymore, it pressed. I could feel it in my chest, the way you feel humidity before rain. Except, this wasn't weather. It was the house itself. Something beneath the wood and stone felt awake. I had started learning their rhythm by then. The father left early every day, his boots dragging dust across the porch. The mother cleaned, cooked, prayed. The children played in the yard until the sun burned too bright, then came back inside, chattering about lessons and chores. They spoke like a family. They acted like one. But the words didn't always match the tone. That morning, as I listened from the crawl space, I heard the mother say something that made me stop breathing. We'll need to find some fresh meat soon. At first, I thought she meant livestock. The family kept goats out back. I'd seen them through a cracked window, their eyes catching light like tiny mirrors. But then the father replied, his voice low and flat. Not the small one this time. The land won't take it. There was a long pause. Then almost gently, the mother said, then we'll use the deep one. The deep one? I didn't know what that meant, but the words stuck like splinters under my skin. Later that day, when the family drove out in their truck, I waited an hour to be sure they were gone. Then I left my hiding place. The house felt different without them, emptier, but not peaceful. The silence was too precise, like someone was holding their breath in the next room. I walked barefoot to keep from making noise. Every step creaked in slow protest. I checked the kitchen first. The smell of spices and smoke lingered thick and sweet. On the counter, I noticed a row of jars filled with herbs, each labeled in handwriting, too careful to be casual. But a few of them weren't labeled at all. I lifted one. Inside was something dark, floating in oil flesh, maybe, but I couldn't tell. I put it back. There were more crosses carved into the walls I hadn't noticed before. Tiny, crude ones, etched beneath windowsills, into the corners of doors, the base of the table legs. Each cut looked fresh, as though they'd been remade again and again. When I reached the kitchen rug, something caught my eye. A dent in the fabric, subtle round, out of place. I knelt and pulled it back. A wooden hatch. It was about 2 feet wide, with a brass handle darkened by age. 4 nails held it shut. My pulse hammered so loud I could barely hear the world around me. I pried the nails out one by one with the tip of my knife. The last one squealed as it came loose, echoing too long in the still air. Then carefully, I lifted the hatch. A wave of cold air rose up and kissed my face. It smelled like soil salt and iron. A narrow staircase descended into black. I hesitated at the top. Every part of me screamed, "Don't," but that's never been enough to stop me. I pulled out my flashlight, wrapped the lens in cloth to dull the beam, and aimed it downward. The steps were wooden, uneven, worn smooth by decades of use. The walls were stone slick with moisture. Halfway down, I heard something, a faint drip like water on metal. When I reached the bottom, the beam caught the outline of a large room. Rough stone walls reinforced with timber. Hooks hanging from the ceiling, rusted chains still attached. Some of the links glistened with something dark. The floor was stained in irregular patches. I told myself it was a butchering room. Farms had those. But the air didn't smell like any slaughterhouse I'd ever known. It was too clean, too dry, like the scent had been erased and replaced by something older. At the far wall, I found a set of crates stacked high. Behind them, a corner where the shadows pooled deeper. It wasn't a big space, but it would do. A perfect hiding spot. I decided to make it mine. I stayed there for hours, listening to the muffled world above. Every creak of the floorboards, every shift of wind through the rafters sounded amplified underground. The cold kept creeping into my bones until I lost track of time. When I finally climbed back up, I pushed the hatch shut, replaced the nails, and rolled the rug back over the seam. That night, I didn't sleep. Around midnight, I heard the mother's voice again through the floorboards, soft, rhythmic, almost tender. She was praying, "Keep the blood pure, keep the earth full, guide us in the harvest." I wanted to believe it was just religion, some rural ritual I didn't understand. But her words lingered twisting in the air until they lost their holiness. 2 mornings later, I got my chance. The family was leaving. I heard them moving around, early bags, rustling boots thudding. The kids complained about chores, their voices tired and whiny. "We'll be gone a full day," the mother said, "maybe 2, if the trails are dry." The father asked, "Should we take all 3?" "No," she said, "just the deep one. The others are too thin. The land won't respond." Then the truck started rattling across the gravel until the sound vanished into the desert. I waited 15 minutes, maybe 20. Then I moved. The house was silent again, completely still. I peeled back the rug. The hatch stared up at me like an open wound. This time, I didn't hesitate. The hinges moaned as I lifted it, and a breath of cold air rushed up to meet me. I climbed down, closing it behind me. The smell hit harder now, iron rot, and something sweet enough to make my stomach turn. I reached the bottom and turned the light on again. The room looked just as it had before, except now the stains seemed darker. The chains swayed slightly, as though someone had brushed past them. I told myself it was just the air. Then I heard it. Not a drip, not the creak of old wood. A sigh, long, soft, and close. I froze, holding the flashlight low. The sound came from the far side of the room behind one of the wooden beams. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. Nothing followed. No footsteps. No voice. Just that sigh, still hanging in the air, like something had been waiting a long time for me to come down there. I backed up slowly toward the stairs. My hand brushed the stone wall, and for a second I could swear it was warm. When I finally climbed out and shut the hatch, I nailed it closed again and pushed the rug over the seam, my hands shaking the whole time. Then I sat there in the kitchen, listening to my own heartbeat echo through the quiet. Above me, the windmill turned creaking like an old spine. And from somewhere beneath the floor, I heard a whisper I couldn't make out. It wasn't the house creaking. It was something breathing back. They came back at sunset. I knew it by the rhythm of the tires on the gravel, the way the engine coughed and died, the slam of the truck doors. I was in my hiding place, behind the wall panel, again every muscle locked breath thin. The house seemed to tense with me, as if it knew what was coming. The father's boots thudded across the porch first. He was muttering something too low to hear words that rose and fell like waves. The mother followed her footsteps lighter, but there was something in the air around her, a weight that made the wood creak when she walked. The children were silent. No laughter this time, no shouting, just the sound of small feet and the faint jingle of metal. I stayed still for hours, waiting for the noises to fade, for sleep to claim them, like every night before. But sleep never came to that house. Just before midnight, I heard movement again. The soft creak of the hatch. The sound cut through the silence like a blade. I pressed my ear to the panel, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might shake the wall. I could hear voices, not whispers, not conversation, chanting, a steady rhythmic murmur that came from below, rising and falling, in a language that scraped the edges of the human throat. Then something heavier, a body being dragged. I left the crawl space before I could stop myself. My hands moved without thought, my feet silent against the floor. I crept down the hallway, past the kitchen toward that rug. It was already rolled aside. The hatch gaped open. Light spilled out, flickering and red, like fire seen through blood. I moved closer, crouching at the edge of the opening. The chanting grew clearer. It wasn't English. It wasn't Latin. It was older vowels, stretched into pain consonants that cracked like dry wood. The air that rose from below smelled of iron and smoke, and something sweetly rotten. I leaned forward, just enough to see. There were 4 of them down there. The father, the mother, and 2 figures in long dark robes, faces hidden by heavy hoods. Lanterns hung from hooks in the ceiling, their flames trembling. In the center of the room, on that butcher's table I'd seen before, lay a woman. She wasn't one of them. Her skin was pale and shining with sweat, her stomach swollen tight beneath a torn dress. Her wrists were bound with coarse rope. Her chest rose and fell in shallow, uneven breaths. The father stood over her, a knife in his hand. I couldn't move. The mother was speaking now, her voice low but steady, guiding the words of the chant like a conductor. The robed figures knelt, dipping long bones into jars of dark liquid and tracing symbols on the floor circles, lines, spirals that seemed to shift when I blinked. The liquid gleamed thickly in the lantern light. Blood. One of them drew a pentagram into the dirt, filling the grooves with that same blood. And when it was done, it shone wetly, reflecting the trembling flames. "She's strong," one of the robed figures said. "She'll hold," another replied. The mother went to a crate in the corner and took something wrapped in red cloth. She handed it to the father, who unwrapped it with trembling hands. The blade inside curved like a crescent moon, polished and old. He leaned down over the woman, brushed her hair from her forehead. For a second, he looked like a man saying goodbye. Then he drove the knife straight into her chest. Her eyes snapped open. She didn't scream, but her mouth opened wide enough for a sound that never came. Blood welled up around the blade, spreading fast, spilling over the edges of the table. Her fingers clawed at the wood, her legs kicked once, twice, then went still. The father pulled the knife out, folded it back in the red cloth, and stepped away. The chanting changed. The rhythm quickened. The robed figures pressed their palms to the blood-soaked floor and whispered in unison. The symbols began to glow faintly at first, then brighter, pulsing like veins under skin. The mother disappeared upstairs for a moment. When she came back, she was carrying something in her arms. At first, I thought it was a bundle of fabric. Then I saw the eyes. It was a goat's head, freshly severed. She carried it as if it was sacred, cradled close to her chest. Blood dripped from its neck, thick and dark, spattering her dress. She placed it gently beside the woman's body. The father took up the curved knife again. He didn't look at his wife. He didn't look at the others. He just bent over the dead woman and began to saw. It took longer than I can bear to remember. Bone-cracked tendons snapped. The sound was wet and muffled. When he finally lifted the head, free steam rose from the wound. He placed it in a clay bowl and set it beside the table. Then, with careful precision, they lifted the goat's head and pressed it onto the open neck. The fit was wrong, the scale off, but they forced it down anyway, binding it with wire and twine until it sat flush. Blood ran from the seam, soaking into the pentagram. The symbols flared white. The air changed pressure, bending sound collapsing in on itself. My ears rang, my vision warped. The light flickered and swam. Then the body moved. First, the legs twitching like a corpse jolted by electricity. Then the arms, fingers curling, flexing. The chest heaved once, twice, like someone drowning in reverse. The goat's mouth opened. From deep inside came a gurgling sound, wet and awful, that grew into something that could almost be words. "Why have you summoned me?" The voice wasn't loud, but it filled every corner of the room. The father fell to his knees. "The land has withered. The earth rejects us. We ask your blessing, Great One. Let the soil breathe again." The goat's head, tilted eyes rolling white. The room shook. The jaws rattled, one of them cracking down the middle. "You have wasted blood," it hissed. "You offer me rot. You call me with weakness." The two robed figures looked at each other. One said, "We must leave it to rest. The lines are impure." The mother whispered, desperate, "Please." Don't abandon us again. But the robed man only shook his head. Seal it. Let it sleep. We will return when the air is clean. The creature slammed its hands onto the table, splintering the wood. Sparks flared from the salt lines drawn on the floor, bursting like fireflies. Return prepared, it said. They backed away. The father wiped his blade clean and wrapped it once more. The mother began to weep softly, her tears falling into the blood. One by one, they ascended the stairs. I ducked back before they reached the hatch, pressing myself against the shadows beneath the kitchen table. I heard the heavy thud of the door closing, the scrape of metal bolts, the drag of something heavy across the floor. Then the high whine of a drill. They were sealing it. When the last sound faded, the silence returned, thick, endless. And then, from below, something breathed, slow, deep, wet. It wasn't human anymore. It was waiting. For a long time, I didn't move. I sat under that kitchen table. My body locked my hands, slick with sweat. My heart pounding so loud, I thought it might draw attention. Above me, the world had gone still. No footsteps, no wind, just the low hum of silence pressing from all sides. But beneath me, the house breathed. It started soft, a slow exhale that rose through the floorboards like a draft. Then another longer this time, carrying the faintest scent of iron and rot. The kind of smell that sticks to the back of your throat and doesn't leave. I told myself it was just the house settling. Old wood, air vents, pipes. That lie didn't even last a minute. Because then it spoke. I know you're here. The voice wasn't loud, but it reached through the floor like smoke curling around my ribs, sliding between my bones. It wasn't a whisper. It was inside the walls, inside me. I froze. My breath caught in my chest, a trapped animal clawing for escape. I smelled you, it said again. Voice, slow, deliberate. Since the moment I came. The words dragged through the air like something alive. Every syllable sounded like it was being chewed before it was spoken. I pressed my hands over my mouth and tried to stay still. I knew sound carried through old houses like this. I'd survived countless nights in crawl spaces, attics, basements. I knew how to disappear. But this thing didn't find you through sound. It sensed. You watched, it said. You watched them feed me. I clenched my jaw, my nails digging into my palms until they drew blood. The boards beneath me trembled slightly, dust drifting down from between the seams. You and I are the same, it said softer now. Both of us hiding in their house. Both of us living on what they leave behind. My body wanted to run, but there was nowhere to go. The hatch was sealed. The doors would creak. The windows. God, I didn't even know if they could open. Then came another sound. A scrape. Like claws dragging across stone. Something moved down there. I could hear it, shifting, stretching, brushing against the walls. Chains clinked. The faint, wet noise of flesh against stone. You want to leave it, said. They will not let you. Tomorrow, they will come back. They will burn the floor. They will tear the walls apart. They will find you. My throat was dry. My tongue felt like sand. I tried to swallow, but even that sound felt too loud. The voice paused, and for a moment the silence itself seemed to tilt. Then it spoke again, almost gentle. I can help you leave. I didn't believe it. I couldn't. This was the kind of voice that offered deals carved in bone, promises you couldn't survive. But the part of me that still thought, like a Frogger, the survivor, the ghost, couldn't help listening. Break the salt, it said. Just one line. That is all it takes. You help me, I help you. I didn't move. One wish, it said. That's the price. My stomach turned. My instincts screamed that this wasn't a negotiation. It was a trap. The kind of trick that ended with your name being whispered in places you never wanted to reach. And yet I thought of the sound of that drill, the seal over the hatch, the way the father had said they'll be gone for a day or two. What if they didn't come back to unseal it? What if this was how I died, buried under their house, forgotten rotting, beside something not human enough to even eat me? You do not have to die here, the voice said again. You only have to open it. I don't remember standing up. I just remember my knees locking and unlocking, like I was watching myself from somewhere else. My hand reached for the edge of the rug, fingers trembling. The hatch was cold when I touched it. Not like metal or stone cold, in a way that felt aware, like it was reacting to me. I pulled it open. The hinges moaned softly, and the air that came out was thick enough to taste. I started down the stairs. Halfway down, I heard it moving again, a wet shuffle, slow and deliberate. The light from my covered flashlight barely reached the bottom, but I could see enough. It was crouched on the table now. The goat's head still sat atop the woman's body, but the seams had stretched. The flesh around the neck pulsed faintly. Veins webbed out like dark roots. The arms were too long, the legs folded wrong. It turned toward me without moving its head. Closer, it said. I stopped at the base of the stairs, the edge of the salt circle, glowing faintly at my feet. One line, it whispered. Just one. The words slid across the air like honey over glass. I don't know if I nodded or if my body simply gave in, but I stepped forward. My boot brushed the edge of the salt, scattering a few grains. The faint light in the circle flickered. Yes, it said, voice, almost joyous. Finish it. I kicked the line. The salt broke. The entire room shuddered. The symbols on the floor flared, once burning red. The creature rose to its full height, the table splintering beneath it. It stepped over the circle, its hooves clicking against the stone, its body straightening in ways no body should. The head turned toward me, its empty eyes catching the dim light. You are free, it said, and so am I. I stumbled backward, nearly falling into the stairs. My flashlight slipped from my hand, rolling across the floor and stopping near the far wall. The creature didn't lunge. It didn't roar or attack. It simply watched me, its chest heaving the air around it, vibrating with heat. Turn around, it said softly. For a moment, I thought this was it. That I'd be torn apart, devoured, unmade, in whatever way things like this do. But when I turned, it was gone. The basement was empty. The blood on the floor had vanished, the symbols burned out. Even the smell had faded. Only the faint warmth in the air remained. Then I heard it from above, a scream, high, human. The sound of wood breaking, the heavy thud of something massive moving across the floor, a crash, another scream, then silence. I climbed the stairs slowly, each step heavier than the last. The air grew thicker, hotter. When I reached the top, the hatch opened easily. The kitchen was red, not from firelight, but blood smeared across walls, dripping from the ceiling, pooling beneath the table. The bodies of the robed men lay torn open, their faces twisted in frozen terror. The father's shotgun was splintered in half his body, pinned against the wall. The mother, her head was missing. I wanted to scream. Instead, I turned toward the door. It was open. The night waited beyond. I ran. The air outside felt cleaner, colder, but not safe. The fields around the house shimmered faintly in the dark, every stalk of grass, whispering against the wind. I sprinted toward the edge of the property, where the green met the desert sand. And then I hit it, an invisible wall. I slammed into it hard enough to knock the air from my lungs. I tried again, clawing at nothing, pounding, until my fists ached. The barrier didn't move. I dropped to my knees, gasping, staring at the faint shimmer in the air, a thin line of salt buried in the soil, circling the land like a noose. Then I heard it behind me, the sound of hooves, slow, steady, coming closer. I turned. It was standing at the porch, half in shadow. The goat's head tilted slightly, watching me. Its body was taller now, straighter, almost human. The air around it pulsed faintly with heat, distorting the stars behind it. It didn't move closer. It didn't need to. My wish, it said. Then it smiled, and everything went dark. When I opened my eyes, it was daylight. The first thing I noticed was the silence, not the kind that comes after noise, but the kind that replaces it. The kind that fills every space like water pressing against your ears until you start to hear your own pulse. I was lying on the front porch. My clothes were dry. My hands were clean. The air smelled like grass and sunlight and nothing else. No blood, no bodies, no proof that any of it had happened. I sat up slowly, every muscle stiff. My mind fogged as if I'd been drugged. The world looked washed, too bright, too clear. I blinked until the haze faded. The house stood exactly as it had before. White paint, still windows, curtains swaying in the breeze. The fields around it were green and lush, the windmill turning lazily against a sky too blue to belong here. For a moment, I thought I'd dreamed the whole thing. But then I saw the hatch. It was gone. No rug, no seam in the floor, no trace that a basement had ever existed, just polished wood, smooth and clean. That's when I knew I hadn't escaped. I was still here. I stood, legs trembling, and stumbled into the kitchen. The refrigerator hummed softly, the scent of bread and jam hanging faintly in the air. On the counter, a loaf of bread was half sliced. A knife lay beside it. Everything was perfect. Too perfect. I turned toward the living room. The furniture was rearranged, subtly just enough that it felt wrong. The chairs faced the wrong wall. The family portraits were missing. The air felt heavy, dense with warmth that didn't come from the sun. I started calling out. Not words, just sounds. Anything to prove I wasn't alone. That's when I heard its soft, wet breathing coming from the hallway. I followed it. The sound led me upstairs to the master bedroom. The door was open. The bed was made. Sunlight spilled through the curtains, and in that light, something moved. At first, I thought it was a shadow. Then I saw it small, curled on the floor beside the dresser, its back rising and falling. The creature. It was smaller now, no longer monstrous. No horns, no blood, no claws, just a child. Its skin was gray at first glance, but under the sunlight, it shimmered faintly alive with something pulsing beneath. Thin black hair clung to its head. Its eyes were open wide and dark too deep for any child's eyes. When it saw me, it smiled. "Dad," it said. The words slid through me like a knife dipped in sugar, sweet and deadly. I couldn't breathe. I stumbled back, knocking into the wall. My mouth opened, but no sound came out. It crawled closer, dragging its small hands along the floor, moving with that strange fluidity that didn't belong to anything human. When it reached me, it sat back on its haunches and tilted its head, waiting. I don't know how long I stared. Minutes, maybe hours. I couldn't move, couldn't think. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but my legs wouldn't obey. The thing reached out and touched my knee. Its fingers were cold and damp. "You promised," it whispered. "My wish." I shook my head, barely able to speak. "What do you want?" It smiled wider, showing small, perfect teeth. "You'll see." Then it stood, its joints cracking faintly. It walked to the window and looked out across the fields. The windmill turned slowly, casting long, broken shadows over the grass. When it spoke again, its voice was softer, like a child repeating words it had only just learned. "The land breathes again." I followed its gaze. The fields were breathing the soil, rising and falling, the crops shifting like waves on a black sea. A low hum vibrated through the air, deep enough to make my bones ache. I backed away, gripping the door frame. "What did you do?" It turned toward me, that impossible calm still painted on its face. "You helped me. Now I help you." It pointed to the bed. I didn't want to look, but I did. There were shapes under the blanket, human shapes, small ones, 3 of them lying side by side. The children. Their eyes were open, glassy, unmoving, and yet their mouths were smiling. The creature climbed onto the bed, between them, resting its head against the middle child's chest. For a second, I thought it was morning. Then the air changed. The bed shifted. The children's hands twitched. Their chests rose. Breath returned. But the sound of it wasn't human. It was too wet, too slow. The smell of earth filled the room, the same damp, rotting sweetness that had haunted the basement. The creature looked up at me, its eyes now burning faintly from within. "Family," it said. And the 3 bodies turned their heads toward me at once. I ran. I don't remember how I got outside. I don't remember the stairs, or the door, or the porch. I just remember the sunlight burning against my face and the sound of laughter behind me, thin, high, echoing. The invisible wall was still there. I hit it again and again until my hands bled. I screamed until my voice cracked. Behind me, I heard footsteps. Small, quick, multiplied. When I turned, they were standing in the doorway. The creature and the 3 children beside it, all smiling. Their eyes glowed faintly now, not bright, just enough to catch the light. The creature raised its hand, palm open. "Stay," it said. "The land needs us." And then, almost tenderly, "You are mine now." I fell to my knees. My breath came ragged, my hands shaking uncontrollably. The air around me shimmered. The line of salt beneath the grass flickered faintly, sealing the world inside itself once more. The house behind them was perfect. The fields were green, the sky endless and blue. And me, the ghost that used to slip through other people's walls, was now trapped in one of my own. The creature stepped forward, its eyes soft, almost kind. "You helped me live," it said. "Now you will never die." Then it smiled again, and somewhere beneath the earth, the house exhaled. I don't know how much time has passed. It feels like days, maybe weeks, but the sun never moves the same way twice. Sometimes it rises in the north. Sometimes it doesn't rise at all. The light changes, the air shifts, yet the ranch stays exactly as it was still perfect alive. I tried counting the days at first. I marked the porch rail with a knife. 22 marks in, I realized the cuts healed overnight. The wood grew back, smooth, whole, like the house itself refused to let me remember. Now I just exist. The creature, my child, if I can even call it that, is growing fast. Not like a human grows. There's no awkward stage, no hunger, no fatigue. It just changes. Sometimes overnight. Its skin sheds faintly every few days, turning from gray to pale, to something almost beautiful. Its hair has thickened dark and soft. Its voice, once broken and small, has become melodic, calm, and far too knowing. And its eyes, God, its eyes never changed. They're the only thing that still betray what it really is. Deep and bottomless, swirling like smoke behind glass. It calls me father every morning. It says we are family. The others, the children from the bed, wander the halls now. They laugh and play like they've always belonged here. But when they laugh, the sound doesn't echo right. It flutters too long in the air, like it's searching for somewhere else to land. I've tried to escape 100 different ways. I've smashed the windows, they mend themselves. I've burned the curtains, they regrow new and clean by sunrise. I've even tried the gun again. The bullet fired this time. It tore through my stomach. I felt choking on my own breath. And then I woke up on the porch again, unscarred, the creature sitting beside me humming softly. It said, "You can't die here. Not while the land still breathes." That was the moment I stopped trying. The nights are the worst. The fields move under moonlight, rippling like muscle beneath skin. I hear voices rising from beneath the soil. They sound like prayers, but they're spoken in a language I don't know. The windmill never stops. Even when there's no wind, it turns slow and patient. Sometimes when it creaks, it sounds like words, like breath. The child, my demon, spends hours at the window, watching it turn. It says the windmill keeps the blood moving, that it keeps us alive. I asked it once what that meant. It smiled and said, "You opened the line, you broke the salt, you gave the land its breath again, you gave me you." I wanted to ask what that made me prisoner, sacrifice, caretaker, but I already knew. I was the anchor, the human tether that bound this place to the world. Without me, it said, the barrier would break. Without me, the earth would starve. Without me, it would have no home. I should have hated it. I wanted to. But there's something in its voice, something that bends the will. When it speaks, it sounds like love disguised as reason. "You kept yourself hidden all your life," it said. "Now you have somewhere to belong." And the worst part, some small part of me believed it. One night, I woke to the sound of humming downstairs. It wasn't the creature's usual tune. It was older, darker. I followed the sound through the hall until I reached the kitchen. The creature stood in the center of the room, surrounded by the other 3 children. They were holding hands. The air shimmered faintly around them. The floorboards beneath their feet pulsed with a dull red glow. The creature looked up at me, smiling. "It's almost ready," it said. I asked what was ready. It didn't answer. It just turned to the others and whispered something too soft to catch. The glow deepened, spreading across the floor, tracing the same circular pattern I'd seen in the basement. Salt, blood, symbols. It was rebuilding the seal, not to keep something in, but to keep something out. The air grew heavy. My ears rang. The walls groaned. And then the floor opened, not like a hole, but like a breath. A faint sigh rising from beneath the house, carrying heat and whispers that didn't belong to this world. I stumbled backward, covering my ears. The children didn't move. The creature looked at me again. "Don't be afraid, father. This is home now." Then everything went black. When I woke, the ranch was quiet again. The children were gone. The symbols had vanished. The floor was clean. Only one thing was different. The house no longer cast a shadow. I stepped outside to see why. The sky was red. Not burning, not storming, just red. like the light of a dying sun frozen in place, and the land beyond the fence was gone. No desert, no road, no horizon, only blackness. The world had ended, or maybe the ranch had simply been cut loose from it, floating somewhere between what was real and what wasn't. I turned toward the house. The creature stood on the porch, taller now, grown elegant, almost human in form, but with that same unnatural stillness that made my skin crawl. "It's better this way," it said. "No more running, no more hiding. Just us." I wanted to scream, but my throat wouldn't open, because deep down, I knew it was right. There was no world left for me, no home, no people, only the house, only the land, only it. Sometimes I still hear footsteps under the floorboards, quick human steps, like someone sneaking where they don't belong. And sometimes, when the windmill creaks just right, I'd swear I hear voices whispering through the vents. Froggers, new ones. The curious, the brave, the foolish. I can smell them before they enter. The faint scent of sweat and fear. And when they finally cross the line, when they break the salt, I smile, because I know what comes next. It took me a long time to understand what I had become. Days and nights lost their edges. The red sky above the ranch never changed. The air grew heavy, thick with the sweetness of rot and the hum of unseen insects. The house no longer creaked with age. It breathed its walls, shifting softly, as though it were alive, and I could feel its rhythm echoing in my chest. There were moments when I thought I could still leave. I'd walk to the border, that invisible barrier that separated this place from everything else, and press my hands against it until the skin bruised. It would shimmer faintly beneath my touch, like glass catching light, then push back with a warmth that felt almost like a heartbeat. Sometimes I would think I could hear the world on the other side. The faint murmur of traffic, the distant bark of a dog, the wind moving through trees that weren't here. But the longer I listened, the more I realized it wasn't the world I was hearing. It was memories echoing back from a place that had forgotten me. And then I'd hear her, the creature. It never called me by my name anymore, just Father. Each time it said it, the word sounded less like affection and more like ownership. "You gave life to this place," it said. "Now you must feed it." At first, I didn't understand, but the truth came slowly, like rot creeping through wood. The land didn't just trap me here, it bound me. The soil itself was alive, hungry, whispering for sustenance. Every time I refused, the air grew thicker. The sky darkened. The ground beneath my feet pulsed with impatience. And then, one night, I heard it again. Footsteps. Human footsteps. Soft, hesitant, moving through the grass just beyond the porch. I froze. For a long moment, I thought I was hallucinating. But then I saw him, a man young, thin with a backpack slung across one shoulder. He was looking at the house the same way I once had curiosity balanced on fear. A Frogger. I knew it instantly. The careful movements, the way he paused before each step, the silent calculation in his eyes. He was me. I should have warned him. I should have shouted for him to turn back, to run, to never cross that line. But when I opened my mouth, the words wouldn't come. Something else did. A whisper that didn't belong to me. It slid out of my throat like smoke. "Come inside." The man froze. He looked around trying to trace the voice. He didn't see me, but he heard me. I could tell. His shoulders tensed, his breathing quickened, but curiosity won. It always does. He stepped forward, and as soon as his boot crossed the border, The air shimmered just like it had when I first arrived. The smell of rain and soil filled the night. I felt the warmth of the house surge through me, like blood rushing through a freshly opened vein. The land had accepted him. He was inside. He crept around the porch, peering through the windows. I followed silently, unseen, my body moving with an ease that terrified me. I could pass through the walls, now not entirely physical, not entirely shadow. I was part of the house, part of the land. He found the unlocked window, the same one I had used years ago, and slipped inside. I waited in the kitchen doorway, watching him through the reflection on the glass. He moved carefully, scanning the room. He didn't notice the faint marks on the walls, the crosses, the carvings, the symbols burned into the wood like scars. He didn't notice the smell either. That damp, sweet odor of decay that clings to everything here. When he finally turned, our eyes met in the reflection of the kitchen window. He gasped, spinning around, but there was no one there. I was already behind him. "You shouldn't have come," I whispered. He stumbled backward, his flashlight flickering across the walls. "Who's there?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. My words weren't my own anymore. They were the house's, the creatures. I was the voice that lured, the echo that guided. He started toward the door, but the floor shifted beneath him. The boards rippled like water, swallowing the sound of his footsteps. He froze again, panic spreading across his face. From upstairs came a soft, childlike laugh. Then another. Then hers. The creature's. He turned toward the stairs, just as the light in his hand flickered out. The darkness swallowed him. I don't remember what happened next. When I came to, the air smelled of iron and smoke. The man was gone. The floorboards were clean again. But the house felt different, stronger, heavier, sated. And I felt it too. A warmth spreading through my chest. The same warmth I'd once felt from the land itself. I had fed it. Not by choice, not entirely. But I had. The creature found me on the porch that morning. It looked older again. Its face almost human. Now its eyes softer, but still bottomless. It sat beside me and handed me a cup of tea. "He's part of us now," it said. "You did well." I wanted to scream at it. I wanted to tear the words from its throat, but I couldn't. My hands shook, my voice cracked, and all I could manage was a whisper. "Why me?" It smiled, that same gentle, perfect smile. "Because you were the first to understand what it means to belong. You hid from the world your whole life. You wanted to be unseen. Now no one will ever forget you." It leaned closer, its breath warm against my ear. "Every lost soul who comes here will hear your story. Every one of them will see your face in the window. And they'll step inside just like you did. The land must live, Father. The land must feed." I sat there long after it left, staring out at the fields. The crops swayed gently, though there was no wind. The windmill turned slowly, creaking in time with my heartbeat. And somewhere out there in the black distance, beyond the edge of the world, I could see movement. Another figure walking toward the house. Another me. I no longer fight it. I no longer pray for escape. Because now I understand what this place truly is. It isn't a home. It isn't a trap. It's a mouth. And I am its tongue. They say there's nothing out here. No trees, no rivers. No sound but the wind scraping the desert flat. But he'd seen it, a patch of green in the satellite photos, a perfect square of life in the middle of nowhere. The internet had called it the Utah Anomaly. Frogger boards called it the garden that shouldn't be. A handful of users claim to have gone looking for it. None ever posted again. He didn't believe in ghost stories. He believed in challenges. The man's boots left shallow prints in the sand as he walked. The sun was low, bleeding orange through the haze. Every step closer, the air grew cooler, wetter, more alive. Then he saw it. Grass impossibly green, stretching outward in a neat square around an old ranch house. White siding, wooden porch, a windmill creaking lazily beside it. It looked wrong, like a photograph pasted onto the world. He crouched near the border, brushing his hand across the soil. The line was sharp one side, dust the other, soft grass. Beneath it, something white shimmered faintly in the dirt. Salt. He grinned. Somebody's little experiment. And then he stepped over. The sound stopped. All of it. The wind, the crunch of his boots, even his own breathing, seemed swallowed by the air. He turned once, just to make sure he could still see the horizon. He couldn't. The desert was gone. Only blackness beyond the grass. The air smelled faintly of rain and something sweet. He started toward the house. The door was unlocked. Inside it smelled like cedar and candle wax. The place was immaculate old-fashioned furniture, framed photographs on the walls, a Bible open on the table. "Hello," he called, his voice, small against the stillness. No answer. He moved deeper inside. The floorboards creaked, but the sound didn't echo right. It fell flat, like the house absorbed it. The kitchen light was on. A pot of tea steamed gently on the stove. 2 cups sat on the table, one half empty, the other waiting. He frowned. Weird. From somewhere upstairs came a faint thump. He looked up toward the ceiling. Anyone home? Another thump. Softer this time, followed by a long, low creak. Something about the sound made his skin crawl. It wasn't footsteps. It was slower, heavier, like something dragging its weight across the floor. He started toward the stairs, each step careful, deliberate. Halfway up, he froze. Someone was humming, a low, steady tune. Familiar somehow, like a lullaby he'd heard as a child. He took another step. The sound stopped. "Hello," he whispered. Then a voice answered, soft, close, but coming from nowhere at all. "You made it." He spun around, flashlight shaking in his hand. "Who's there?" "You came to see the green." The voice was low, patient. It carried through the walls, through the floor, through him. "Don't be afraid." He backed down a step. I didn't mean to trespass. I was just looking for something." The voice finished for him. He swallowed hard. "Who are you?" Someone who used to ask the same thing. The light flickered. Every bulb in the house pulsed once, dimmed, then glowed faintly red, as if blood ran through the wires. He dropped his flashlight. It hit the step and rolled. When he reached to grab it, he saw movement in the reflection of the glass cabinet beside him. A figure standing behind him on the stairs. Tall, still, half-shadowed, its head tilted slightly. "You shouldn't have crossed the line." He turned, but there was no one there. Only the hallway, stretching out in front of him, lined with crosses carved deep into the wood. He stumbled back, heart pounding. This is some kind of trick." "No trick," the voice said now, soft and close, whispering through the vents. "The land breathes through us." He bolted down the stairs. The front door loomed ahead, but when he grabbed the handle, the metal burned cold enough to blister his palm. The wood pulsed under his grip, warm, alive. "Stay," the voice whispered. Something moved in the kitchen doorway. A child, maybe 10 years old, pale as bone, smiling with too many teeth. Behind it stood a man, tall, hollow-eyed skin, gray as dust. The man smiled too, You're just in time for supper. The Frogger froze, paralyzed by that voice, calm, familiar, impossibly sad. He took a step back. Who are you? The man tilted his head, and in the dying light of the room, the Frogger saw the truth, his own reflection staring back at him. Older, broken, empty. The voice came one last time low and trembling. You're home now. The lights flickered, the windmill creaked, and then silence. Weeks later, satellite images of the desert updated again. The green square was still there. Only now the ranch had grown larger. The fields spread wider. And in the newest photo, just at the edge of the property, stood a small figure walking toward it. Another visitor. Another offering. Another soul for the house that breathes. You never know who's watching you. The walls remember every sound, every breath, every heartbeat that passes through them. And somewhere out there beneath the sky that never changes, a house still waits its windows, glowing softly in the dark, its fields impossibly green. Another traveler will come. Another voice will whisper, "Come inside." And the land will breathe again. If you ever find a patch of perfect life where there shouldn't be any, keep walking, don't stop, don't look back. Because the house that breathes is always hungry. This has been a NightLore story. Sleep well if you can.